All right. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We are going to start our board meeting with our Food for Thought speaker series presentation. Tonight, we are happy to introduce our speaker from Sunrise Frederick. I just wanted to go over a couple of quick ground rules for those who are new to this presentation. This is a TED Talk style presentation. So our speaker will have 20 minutes to speak. And then at the end, they usually supply contact information should you have further questions, but we don't have time for questions within the time limits of the meeting. And we are recording it so that we can soon post the talk and ASL interpretation along with it on our website. So if you haven't checked out the website and some of our previous talks, I'd encourage you to do that as well. All right, so tonight's speaker is Davin Faris. Davin is a student activist with the Sunrise Frederick movement. Davin is a homeschooled junior, writer, and climate justice activist living on his family's eco farm in Frederick County, Maryland. In 2020, he helped co-found Sunrise Frederick, a hub of the National Sunrise Movement. He has continued to organize extensively through Sunrise and other local groups, fighting for political, social, and environmental progress. Davin, take it away.
Hi, thank you. Let's see if we can get the slides up here. Yeah, great. So yes, I'm Davin Faris. I'm a homeschool junior and writer, and in January of 2020, I helped co-found Sunrise Frederick. The Sunrise Movement is a national youth-led climate justice organization. On the national level, we work for a Green New Deal, help to get progressive candidates elected, and try to shift the popular focus towards more sustainable and equitable systems. The main design of Sunrise, though, and one of its greatest strengths, is its decentralization. Apart from a core national staff, the movement is divided into local groups called hubs, each encompassing their own counties, cities, or even schools. Currently, there are more than 400 hubs all across the country. I first got involved because one of my best friends, Piper, reached out to a few of us about this event they were hosting at their house, a Green New Deal launch party, as part of a group called Sunrise. I'd grown up in a progressive family on a regenerative eco farm, and we went to marches in DC and called our congresspeople, but I hadn't done any self-led activism, and that's where Sunrise changed things for me. One trait that defines Sunrise, and that sets it apart from most groups, is that it's entirely youth-led. The logic is that those who will face the greatest impact from climate change are the ones who should be central to fighting it. And in practice, this left me and 6 other kids sitting in a circle one night a week and trying to figure out how to organize a march, how to build our small subset of the movement with what help we had. It wasn't from the ground up, but it was starting from bare foundations. And it was hard. Activism is hard. It can be demoralizing to look at a crisis that is global in every sense of the word and pit yourself personally against it. It's scary to raise your voice against figures of authority, whether they're CEOs or local officials. And it's exhausting to put so much of yourself into something that is fundamentally a gamble, that is a game rigged on every level against you. But there's so much more to organizing than fear and burnout. And that's what makes every moment, every late meeting or day spent out in the cold worth it. That's what I want to tell you about tonight.
The PowerPoint.
I think we have someone whose mic's on. Yes, sorry. I mentioned that I grew up on a regenerative farm a little outside of Frederick. If you're not familiar with regenerative agriculture, although I'm sure a lot of you are, it's based on the idea that much of modern industrial farming is extractive and unhealthy to consumers and also to the planet. Regenerative ag uses more traditional approaches. We move our cows every day, for example, raising and lowering fences to mimic the roaming behavior of buffalo on plains. Rotational grazing prevents the grass from being eaten too low and sequential regrowth actually promotes a healthier environment and sequesters carbon in the ground. The manure left behind does the same thing as it breaks down aerobically, slowly rebuilding the soil that was, when we moved in, decimated by decades of corn fertilizer and pesticide runoff. It all comes back to the land. And for me, climate activism also leads back to agriculture. That's one reason it matters so much to me. If we don't learn to care for the soil, the air, the insects, and we already know how to do all of that, it has real, tangible consequences, especially here in Maryland's largest agricultural county with more than 180,000 acres of farmland. Consequences that end up on our dinner plates and in the fields and forests where I grew up. So that's where I was coming from when I joined Sunrise 2 years ago. And right from the start, we found that as much as activism could be about sweeping global issues, it's also fundamentally a way to connect with people and to build community. When you go out of your comfort zone with others, you feel that closeness, like they get it. Even when things go badly, you end up more resilient. It's an amazing feeling, and it's how I found some of my closest friends through social activism. I remember this one time early on when we were canvassing for signatures downtown. This was right before people started masking and distancing, and we were trying to get signups for an Earth Day rally. Ultimately, the rally had to be canceled because of a pandemic, and we pivoted to a virtual action. But that day, it was just me and another Frederick Sunriser, Emmy, hitting the streets with clipboards. And let me tell you, you have never seen someone walk as fast as when you come up to them on the street with a clipboard. It triggers some sort of primal fight or flight reflex. I swear full-grown adults ran when they saw us. At the end of the day, we had gotten one signature. Of course, we were disappointed, but looking back on it, it was actually a big success. First of all, the two of us were really uncomfortable talking to strangers. After each conversation, we'd argue about who had to approach the next person, who should say what. But then we did it again and again, and each time it became just that much easier. More importantly, it was a shared experience that strengthened our hub. All of us met that night and we laughed about how things had gone and talked about how we'd felt, and then moved on to the next day's plans. Activism work is uncomfortable sometimes. It demands that we reframe our role in the world, break from the script of passivity, and it doesn't always go the way we'd hoped. But uncertainty and disappointment fade, and in doing so, they lead to vulnerability, which leads to connection, to community, which is the lifeblood of our activism. That's what leadership is about at its best. It's recognizing that people are more important than short-term successes, so that even if we don't meet a rally goal or elect a candidate, it's about what we build from that, what comes next. I wouldn't have had the chance to learn that without Sunrise, and I think it's essential to the kind of group we are, grassroots, community-led. We have to build people up, laugh, and make connections and friends, because without all that, there is no movement. Sunrise and other groups like us, it's just people doing their best to fix their piece of a messed up world together. Maybe it seems fragile when I put it like that, but the best part is that those personal bonds are stronger than the systems we resist. Look to the civil rights movement, which Sunrise today has modeled its national approach on. The laws that Dr. King called for seemed impossible at first, idealistic and unattainable. But he and others delivered systemic legislative progress, not through money or top-down political influence, but through the simple, resilient, profoundly human power of people. That's what a movement is made of. A few weeks ago, Piper and I were at a climate strike in DC. It was led by Fridays for Future, a group started by Greta Thunberg, and the strike was in sync with others around the world. Globally, more than 500,000 people joined, many of them youth and students. It was a beautiful day in DC, and we marched and sang and shouted until we lost our voices. The energy there just takes you. It's impossible not to believe we can make things better. One of the speakers there was an organizer with Fridays for Future, and she was 13 years old, shouting into a megaphone, leading hundreds of people in call and response chants outside the White House. It's amazing and inspiring and terrible, because I wish we lived in a world where that wasn't necessary. Think about what you were doing when you were 13. I was goofing off, playing dumb games, reading, having fun, being a kid. That's only possible, though, when the future is taken as a certainty. And even the youngest who are paying attention now know what the rest of their life holds is anything but certain. I was a carefree kid when I was 13. When I was 14, I joined Sunrise. Arshini Prakash, a founder of the Sunrise Movement, was recently quoted in a New Yorker piece as saying, "As a kid, you first have the thought that this is the most dire problem, so surely there are adults in the room who are fixing it. That quickly turns to, oh no, the adults are actually the ones making it worse, and no one has a plan." The broadest story of youth activism, the most universal, is disillusionment. You realize at a certain point that if you want the world to change, you have to work to bring that about. For me and for thousands of youth around the country, that's what Sunrise has been, a means of breaking free from that sense of powerlessness, hopelessness. There's a widespread idea that I think about as the illusion of neutrality. When most people are confronted by the scale of the climate crisis and the damage it stands to inflict, the easiest response is to withdraw, to say, someone else can worry about that. I'm going to keep living my life. But what we all need to recognize is that continuance of the status quo is not a neutral position. If you come across a house on fire, failing to act quickly and responsibly has life or death consequences. If you pull back and say, that's someone's problem, I don't want to get involved, you're still having an impact, a destructive one. And in this case, the house on fire is yours too, and mine, and your children's, and their children's. Neutrality doesn't exist. Looks like we have some more sound coming through. Can everyone make sure they're muted? Great, okay. Sorry. Neutrality doesn't exist because virtually every element of our daily lives is predicated on a system that needs to be realigned. From burning fuels to get to work, to eating food from industrial farms, to buying disposable products and plastics. But I also want to point out that Sunrise doesn't focus on individual actions, the reduce, reuse, recycle staples of classic conservationism. Instead, we approach climate change from an institutional, political perspective. This can be harder to explain to people sometimes, especially youth and others who haven't really been involved with politics. Like the illusion of neutrality, it's an appealing fiction to think that if we each cut back our lifestyle a little bit, nothing else has to be done. And of course, the individual actions matter too. If you can, drive an electric car, buy used clothes, compost. Great. The vast majority of emissions, though, are not in the direct hands of consumers. From industry, energy production, industrial agriculture. And federal regulation is our best and only means of addressing that on the scale required. So Sunrise creates the people power, builds the community, and moves toward systemic political changes. And even in the frustrating popularity contest that is national politics, there have been victories. In the 2020 presidential primaries, more than 3/4 of Democratic candidates came out in favor of the Green New Deal, largely due to the efforts of Sunrise activists. Even Biden, considered a moderate in the race, has put forth a remarkably ambitious and progressive climate proposal patterned on the central ideas that Sunrise has pushed for, like viewing climate change as an opportunity for the creation of millions of green jobs. On a more local scale, in 2020, the Frederick County Council passed a resolution declaring a climate emergency and recently enacted a series of important environmental measures, including an increase in electrification and sustainability funds. By 2026, more than 500,000 homes in Maryland will be powered by a massive offshore wind project, making us a center for renewable energy. And just this spring, the state legislature passed the Climate Solutions Now Act with the support of Sunrise, the Sierra Club, and many others. It's incredibly exciting to see these policies, widely considered peripheral and impractical even a decade ago, recognized as the essential actions that they are. Of course, there have been setbacks too. That climate proposal, which activists pushed so hard for Biden to adopt, is now stalled in Congress, largely because of Joe Manchin, a man who makes $500,000 each year from his stake in the coal plant and calls himself a Democrat. And when the Climate Solutions Now Act passed the Maryland Senate, it was without a key provision to reduce fossil fuel dependency, which industry lobbyists successfully removed. All of which is to say, things are better than they might have been, but our fight is far from over. So, what are we doing locally, and how can you help? As I said, Sunrise is politically focused, which means we're going all out for the 2022 primary elections, specifically county races, Board of Education, County Council, County Executive. We want to be canvassing, making calls, volunteering with campaigns, putting up signs, and whether you want to join Sunrise or not, this is a fantastic opportunity to step up, challenge yourself, find that community of exciting, engaged people. There are some really great candidates running, some of whom you can see here and on the next couple of slides. And we're thrilled to be working with them, whether that's getting out and knocking doors or sharing at online events like this. Several of these folks, including Kai Hagan for County Executive and Billy Reed for House of Delegates, have been deeply involved with Sunrise and other local activist groups, and to have them in those offices would be an amazing victory for our county and state. Election work has also provided, for me, a chance to learn about the apparatus of local government and how we can affect it, especially in Frederick City, where voter turnout is abysmal. Fewer than 25% of registered voters cast ballots in last year's general election for mayor and alderman. That's less than 1 in 4 people voting in a city that most of us would consider progressive and socially active. So our main goal as a hub is not just to support these candidates, but also to get people out to the polls, voter education and registration. There's passive support here for climate response, for social equity, but we need to turn that passive approval into actionable motivation. By the way, if you want to find this later, all of our endorsements are or will be posted on our hub's Instagram and Facebook pages at Sunrise Frederick and on our link tree, which is at the end of this talk. To be clear, there's much more to activism than just elections. On April 9th, Hub members joined an incredible direct action in West Virginia, supporting local groups like West Virginia Rising and a blockade of the Granttown coal plant, which Joe Manchin personally profits from. It was another intense, inspirational action, with the goal of drawing press attention to Manchin's corruption and greed. 16 people were arrested, and we got multiple full-length articles in the state's main paper, as well as widespread TV coverage. I mentioned earlier that a personal connection to climate work, for me, is agriculture. Living that close to the land, it gives me a stake in Sunrise, in the work we do. But the truth is, every single one of us has that, a personal connection, something that might be lost, because climate change is ubiquitous in a way that nothing else is. Maybe social justice is what you care about. The impacts of the climate crisis are far from equitable. Heat waves, air pollution, food scarcity, disease. All of these are borne disproportionately by lower income, marginalized communities. This intersectionality is why we talk about climate justice, responses that address the social elements of the crisis, as well as the purely environmental ones. As the saying goes, climate justice is social justice, and you cannot have one without the other. Maybe the economy is what matters to you. Last year, research by the Swiss Re Institute showed that the global economy could lose up to 18% of its total value by 2050 due to climate change. That's tens of trillions of dollars, but that figure is abstract. Think of what that money means in terms of blighted land, lost crops, ruined lives. Millions of people displaced from their homes, thousands more lost to rising seas and fires. That's the worst case scenario. And it transcends the meaning of economic disaster. But it's not an inevitability, it's a choice. And the reverse is true too. Through the Green New Deal model, climate change can be an opportunity for economic growth, for job creation. It doesn't have to mean sacrifice. It can mean innovation. Imagine if all the workers in coal and natural gas jobs had free training to prepare them for good paying, green energy and infrastructure jobs, being the force that our country needs to fundamentally change the way we power our lives. How many would turn that down? That's what the Green New Deal is all about. Or maybe, like me, what ties you to the climate crisis is this land around us. I spent years playing in these woods, catching crawdads in the creeks, eating food grown in my backyard. And the thought of that being changed or destroyed breaks me open. But all of us have something to lose. And while it's easy to retreat from that, to deny or scapegoat, I truly believe that only through direct individual action can we find hope. And if we don't have hope, what else is there? If you want a place to start, that's what Sunrise was for me. And I know there's a place for everyone in our movement. Send us an email. That's sunrisemovementfrederick@gmail.com, or message us on social media. Come to a hub meeting. See what you find there. Stay hopeful. I'd like to end by reading a short poem I wrote on the relationship between past and future. This is Picnic in Autumn. Children play nearby, given one of the last warm days this year. All shouts and perfect chaos here. And in gold light, you see they are the past, those given the bright face of centuries unbent by hatred and manufactured want. Given the high crooked voice of birds learning to fly in a forest that is never burnt or choked on oil or dreamt of barren soil. Given the stature of saplings, which do not know their reach nor bounds, yet wonder, which will become giants and fall like thunder. Given the wordless innocence of a river running clear for 10,000 miles and years until you damned it a ruin of stone and silt. Given a future born by and born of what was, and that is the children running wild as thieves and laughing at the red fallen leaves. Thank you. If you would like to learn more or get involved with us, please use the QR code to our link tree, find us on socials, or contact us by email. Again, that's sunrisemovementfrederick@gmail.com. Feel free to share with others and let us know if you have any questions. As we head into the primary elections, we need everyone we can get. Thanks so much for having us. Be safe and shine bright.
Thank you so much, Davin. That was amazing.
Thank you, Davin. Wonderful.
It is not a coincidence that we have the largest turnout this evening of any speaker in months. So thank you very much. Like I said, we will be posting all of that on the website in the next couple months. And I know I'd like to go back through the recording and look at some of that again. So thank you. And you're getting lots of kudos in the chat, so please make sure you look there too. I'm going to stop the recording.